In this video, I want to discuss what motivates the thinking mind. And the reason I talk so much about the thinking mind is because my take on all this is to discover who you're not, sort of a netty approach, not this, not that. And so you recognize these programs in the skull, and you recognize that that's exactly what they are. They're not who you truly are. They're just preset machines that are influenced by culture to create the idea of who you think you are. And so the thinking mind is motivated really by one simple, so I try to give a simple version of the video before I unpack it a little deeper. But the simplest version is that the thinking mind is motivated to keep this meat suit alive so it can make other little meat suits that are really similar to it. And that's how you see this whole field of evolutionary psychology emerging. And so much of psychology is actually dedicated to the same idea. Okay, I'm going to put a link to a video that shows the kind of origins of our motives. And it's very interesting because I've talked about this in other clips before. Lots of people have talked about it. If you haven't seen it, it's about some monkeys working for cucumbers, and they seem quite happy with this until the one monkey notices that the one next to it gets a grape, does the exact same task, but it gets a grape as its reward. And then when it goes back to trying to do the same task for cucumbers, it's all workers unite, I'm on strike, and it just throws the cucumber at the experimenter like, I'm not doing this. And that reveals so much about the fundamentals that our species added on to, and what the thinking mind kind of extrapolated and ended up becoming such a huge part of what we call culture. So if we look particularly in Western culture, and it's not all human cultures are like this. Again, I talk about the Piraha, and they don't seem to have fallen into this motivation. But certainly every indication that they could. And so in the one video, I talk about how, there's kind of material temptations, kind of grapes that they get taunted with once in a while. And the Piraha will say something like, "You almost make me want this." And so we could see that it's percolating there in the mammalian mind. It's just that if culture comes, it can alter this. But from so many cultures, what we've done is we added on to it in a very unique way that I'd like to talk about. Because you could say, well, and some people discuss this as our genetic tendency towards fairness. Well, it is. But to unpack this, you really have to look at how the fairness is situated. It's actually very directional in one direction. So it wasn't like the one monkey getting the grape just threw the grape away. That would be one way to accomplish fairness. But that's not what we're programmed to do. At least that's not the motive of what has become the thinking mind. Because again, you just don't see this. You don't see the super wealthy giving away all their possessions. I mean, sometimes you do, but generally, you don't see that happening. What you see is everyone who has less, all of us with cucumbers, we really want to get to the grapes. And how do we do this? Well, again, we get to what motivates the thinking mind. And you could see how culture has gone through times of individual free-thinking renaissance and times of mass conformity. And I think one of the things that's happening right now is we're in one of those times where, again, you can get the house on the hill, you can get the grape, but you're really going to have to suck it up for a while with your cucumbers, and but it's held out as that proverbial carrot. Now, again, that's the reason we can do that, and the reason we have a more sophisticated version than the chimps or monkeys is because that our thinking mind, the real gift and talent of the thinking mind, was to create this abstraction of a possible future. And that's really helpful because it can spin out scenarios in our mind rather than in actual reality, which gives us a huge advantage. But it also spins this wishful thinking that someday I'm going to get the grape. If I just suck it up with the cucumbers just long enough, eventually I will be the one with the grape. And so what that does is it creates this motivation towards, if I'm just obedient, if I'm just a conformist just long enough, eventually, and play by the rules, eventually I will be one of those with the grapes as opposed to the cucumbers. So I think a lot of that captures how we get this kind of inequality in our culture. And it explains why gambling, which I've talked about in a kind of a positive way in other videos. I mean, it's exciting to not know what's going to happen. But really what gambling does is it gives everybody with cucumbers, it lets their mental simulation fantasize about getting grapes one day. And it makes it feel like everything is potentially equal because in a statistical sense, anyone could win the lottery. It really is just a random thing. And it's also quite fascinating that you see this element of gambling increase so much in our culture. The more we become identified with the thinking mind, the more we hold out that possibility to get those grapes. That simulation is playing that one day that will be me working for the grapes. And the reason that plays out is because that's what the thinking mind does. It does these simulations. But again, if you go back 30 years, there may have been two places you could have gambled. Now, I think our entire culture is turning into a gambling culture, whether you gamble with stocks or literal gambling, or even if you get health insurance. I mean, that's still a gamble. So I think that's one of the reasons why gambling has permeated our culture so much, because it goes back to the main motivation of what gets the thinking mind believing that it will tolerate the cucumbers as long as one day it believes it will be eating grapes.